Hello and welcome to the Feminine Millionaire Show. I'm your host, Polly Alexandre. I'm a success coach, intuitive healer, and a passionate creative. And I believe that we all have the power to manifest magic and miracles into our life. If creating success in a spiritual, feminine, and joyful way is your goal, this show is for you. You'll understand how to overcome your past, bring your soul's greatest gifts to the world, and up-level your income, impact, joy, and happiness. Let's all rise together. Welcome to today's episode of the Feminine Millionaire Show, and it's going to be diving into one of my favourite topics, getting organised and decluttering. Today's guest is Cawley, and she is a certified professional organizer. Welcome, Cawley.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here today. So Cawley has a knack for transforming lives as a certified professional organizer. Her insightful ideas and advice have helped thousands of students, clients, and followers on 5 continents conquer clutter and create calm. Her renowned course, The Paper Cleanse, helps people clear desks and ease stress, while her Clarity Connection community provides ongoing support for those seeking organization in all aspects of their home, empowering members to design a life of peace and productivity. Cawley lives in Arlington, Virginia, with her husband of over 30 years. As an Anglophile who also adores alliteration, she delights in hosting friends for divine desserts, decadent drinks, and deep discussions. So great to have you here today.
Thank you so much again for having me, Polly. This is going to be fun.
So decluttering and getting organized is one of my favorite topics. It's a journey I go on again and again. And before we dive into decluttering and the power it can have for our lives, I know that you've been on quite a journey and you're actually on your 8th career now.
Correct.
So I'd love you to walk us through the arc that led you to where you are now. And I'm going to ask you some questions along the way because I think it's so interesting the way women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s are reinventing themselves.
Absolutely. So I went to college for costume and set design, and I got my bachelor's in fine arts in 1985, and of course went right to New York City. And then, it wasn't quite so easy. So to start my career, I worked as a personal assistant for very wealthy women. And that was a great, great thing to do because my lesson learned is that money doesn't make you happy. And it's a really good lesson to have at the age of 21, 22. So I was quite successful, and I did costume design for the Joffrey Ballet and the Juilliard School. And that was wonderful. I was also, let me put you in on a secret, I was Morgan Freeman's mistress. I was his wardrobe mistress, Polly. I hope your listeners weren't going in the wrong direction. He was on Driving Miss Daisy off Broadway, and I was his wardrobe mistress. And he's the nicest guy, let me tell you. And it was so much fun.
Can I just ask you, what is a wardrobe mistress for people listening?
A wardrobe mistress takes care of all of the costumes and wigs. I also did all of the fast changes for Frances Sternhagen, who was my Daisy. And it was a wonderful experience. Part of the best part of that job was that the show was only 90 minutes long. So we were in and out, and our friends on Les Mis and Phantom of the Opera were just having their first intermission, and we were done and already at the bar. So it was a great job.
Now, this is so interesting, because that must have required a lot of organization. So sort of even back then, your job was to be organized and efficient.
Absolutely. And so that was one of the reasons why I was a successful costume designer. I have to tell you, it really wasn't because I was super talented. I could get it done on time and on budget, right? And it's true. I remember way back then, just, way before Excel, just having a spreadsheet on a big piece of paper. And I lived and died by that. The character, their costumes, the costume changes, the different components, right down to, the dress shields that you would sew in under the arms so that the actors wouldn't sweat through their clothes and mark the costumes. And it's absolutely true. That is at the very beginning. I should have realized then that organization was in the stars for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I really want to just actually rewind even earlier. Were you an organized child?
So I can't say that I was an organized child, but my mother was so organized, and it was from necessity. So my mom was born in 1917. She was 47 when she had me. She already had 2 daughters and 2 grandsons. And then, oops, here I came. So she was very frugal. And it's so funny when you hear about like Marie Kondo folding the Kondo fold, I'm like, no, sir. Helen Cawley was doing that in World War II because, my sisters only had like 5 pairs of underwear and then they had to be washed. She had a whole system. So my mom was the ultimate organizer. And I think what she taught me, was essential. So yeah, hats off to my mom for sure.
Yeah, I often find with people's journeys, and sometimes they don't even get to this point till their 40s, 50s, 60s and onwards, but there's often a thread that leads right to when they were a child. Some kind of connection, some kind of apprenticeship, mentoring, interest that then almost circles back decades later.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? So I fell in love with the man who's my husband, and we moved to Boston, and we lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and then he had an opportunity and we moved to Cambridge, England. And so I had to reinvent myself yet again. And that's where I started working in retail, and I worked for some high-end retail. I also worked at the Chanel boutique in Manhattan for a short time when we lived in Manhattan. And that was also a wonderful opportunity because I would win awards for innovation. And all I had done was create an inventory checklist. Again, it was an organizing tool that I designed to make my life as a wardrobe manager, as a boutique manager, easier. And they thought it was absolutely innovative. And so again, the organizing is what made me successful in those careers. Then we moved back to America in 2000. And I played with being a stay-at-home mom. I don't count that as one of my 8 careers. I played with that for a short time. But the moment my daughter went off to kindergarten, I was like, what am I going to be when I grow up? I need to take my talents and do something with it. And it was just at that time, 2003, when all of those hoarder shows and things were starting to come out. And I thought, golly, what has been the thing that I've been successful at? Oh, yeah, I was a costume designer. I was a retail manager. I worked at the Chanel boutique. What made me successful at all of those things? It was that I was organized. And I was just like, oh, so I became an organizer overnight. It's a very low, barrier to enter the business. But even then I would go to, dinner parties with my husband, who's a lawyer. And I'd say to somebody, oh, I'm an organizer. And they'd say, oh, for which labor union? And I'm like, oh, not that kind of organizer, like pantries and closets. And then, of course, the other women would be like, oh, can you come help me with my closet? Absolutely, I can. So it was a wonderful thing because I could also schedule my time so that from my daughter's point of view, I was still a stay-at-home mom. I would just work when she was at school. I could still volunteer to go to the zoo. And it was a perfect career for me. And I realized that it wasn't important just that I was organized. It was important that I could teach others to be organized. And the biggest compliment would be when a client would be like, yeah, I'm good. I got this. You set up a system for me and I've graduated. And I was never offended because that meant that I did my job, right? I taught them how to edit the possessions they had and how to manage the things that they kept within the very busy lives with kids and husbands and spouses and travel and school and sports and all of the things. And so that was a real benefit. I never worked with people who had hoarding disorder. I really truly worked with kind of a higher end clientele, names that I could mention if I hadn't signed an NDA. But it's been a lot of fun, especially in the DC region, having wonderful, interesting, fascinating, the possessions they would have, things from travel all around the world, documents. I had a Rolodex from a client once that, the names in that Rolodex were everybody on the upper level of government. And she was finally at a point where she thought she needed to go digital. And so I had to source somebody to digitize her Rolodex that we could trust, that wouldn't spill the beans on any of these emails and personal phone numbers. It was a wonderful, wonderful career.
One of the things that I've discovered along the way is that sometimes we teach what we need to learn. However, with you, I feel like it's almost like you had these skills that then you applied in different ways. And then it became really clear, like, oh, this is actually what I'm really good at. And this is how I can really help people. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think I think all of us, if we can tap into our gifts, and it's interesting because things that I think are just so common and basic knowledge, other people are like, wait, let me write that down. When we really tap into what our gifts are, and especially if we can share them with others freely, it's so pleasant. I've had people say, you saved my marriage. Like, I didn't save your marriage, but we were able to get the house tidy enough so that your husband wanted to come home, right? It's wonderful to help people transform into a lot of people think, oh, I could never get organized. And I'm like, is that a challenge? Are you challenging me? And it's interesting because I don't say that I'm a coach, because I'm not. I'm more of a organizing dictator. Pretty much with my classes and things, I just say, if you do what I tell you to do, you will be successful. I lay out the steps as simplistic as possible, but I promise you, if you just do them, you will be successful. And so I'm not really a coach because I'm a bit of a dictator, but I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've tried every method, right? And I really feel like I have finalized a couple of methods that really, truly do work, especially for closet processing, paper processing, those types of things that really are universal. We all have paper. We all have clothing. I've got a kind of a kitchen process as well. We've all got, some of us have kitchens with 2 islands. Some of us have 1 drawer, but we all have forks and spoons and knives and pots and pans, right? So there are some universals that I think can apply to everybody.
What I'm hearing is that you've developed systems, that you've got a real knack for the most efficient and the best way to do things that doesn't come naturally to other people. Quite frankly.
Right. And it's just like, some people are gifted singers, but we could all learn to sing, right? So I'm a gifted organizer, but everybody can learn to organize. It's absolutely a teachable skill. So it is nice, especially for people who feel that their whole lives they've been struggling. And it's partially, I like to say, if I can give you a different perspective on it, just a different way of looking at it. For instance, Marie Kondo is and was super successful. What was her secret? It was about, does it spark joy? Instead of talking about what you were getting rid of, she talked about what you were keeping, right? Just that change in perspective clicked for so many people, because if you weren't loving it and keeping it, then the rest was done. You were done with the rest. You didn't have to think about it. And I love that sometimes if I can explain something to a student or a client, just to give them a different perspective, then all of a sudden it's like the light bulb goes off. So
Right.
that's really satisfying.
And I'm curious, based on all your experience, why can't people manage their stuff better? What's going on?
Yeah. So again, to be simplistic, it's twofold. There's too much stuff, and too much stuff takes time to manage. And, I often say to people who have a whole room, they'll have what could be a guest room or an office or a gym or a craft room. Instead of being able to use it, it is just full of stuff. And I say to them, okay, let's just do it very simplistic. If you have a 1,000 square foot home and that takes up 10% of your home and your mortgage is $10,000, that's $1,000 a month that you're paying, right? Or whatever the math is. And when you break it down to math, then they're like, oh, I would always say, I am a brilliant organizer, but I am not a magician, and I cannot make your home bigger. And so one of my POPs, I call them primary organizing principles, is that your container determines the contents. And what I mean by that, Polly, is that you have a gallon of milk. It can only hold 128 ounces or whatever it is, right? You might be able to fit a little bit more, but that's it. I want people to think of their homes as the containers of their contents. So if you have a storage space is fine if you're moving or somebody just passed away and you need to process things. But if you've had a storage space for more than a year, you need to get rid of it because your home is not determining the contents. And you can really make that very simple. Like, I have a drawer that has my pajamas. I actually have two drawers, one for summer pajamas and one for winter pajamas. I love pajamas, but if I get a new pair, I have to get rid of an old pair. All of my pajamas, clean, have to fit in that drawer. I let my container determine the contents. So that's a great tip for people when they're looking. So the excess is one of the issues. And then fitting things in that drawer. Let's go back to the drawer example. If you have all of your clothes in a drawer on top of each other, stacked horizontally, then all you can see is the top three things. But if you go back to I'm going to call it the Cawley fold, not the condo fold. If you file fold those things, you'll be able to see all of your selections. So it's taking things from horizontal to vertical. And so one of my other POPs is horizontal is hidden, vertical is visible. And you can apply this to everything. I say, hang as much of your clothing as possible because on hangers, it's vertical. File fold as much of your clothing as possible. Put your paper, instead of in piles on your desk, take those piles and stand them up and put them in different, labels. Must do, want to do, to pay, to read, to file, whatever your categories are. If you take things that are horizontal and make them vertical, you're going to be so much more successful. So twofold, too much stuff, and then properly organizing what you are keeping. That's why we have the need for people like me. So.
Right. And I really think there is such a need. I've worked with a lot of people over the last 10 years of coaching, and I definitely come across people who are overwhelmed mentally. Usually their homes are in overwhelm as well. Like, there's a direct relationship. When they're in overwhelm, there's a lot of decluttering that needs to be done. And I love that analogy you said. Basically, you're paying for storage. I love that. In your own home, we think of it as something outside, but if we have a spare bedroom full of junk, we're paying for that storage.
Yeah. Especially, when the pandemic hit and people were stuck at home, people needed to carve out those spaces. And I had a wonderful client who was coping with the pandemic by over shopping, and she recognized it. And she had 4 children. She lived in a big, beautiful home. Everybody had their own bedrooms, and we had to do this virtually. And she called me up. She's like, Cawley, let's talk. And I said, what is it that you crave? What do you, She's like, I just need a place of my own to go and maybe do my yoga practice, get back to some meditation, get back to some spirituality. I'm like, how about this? How about you take that beautiful walk-in closet and reduce the clothing by half and make part of it your sanctuary. And again, it was like a light bulb went off. And not only did it stop her from the over shopping, it gave her a place, and she started a Pinterest board, and she chose wallpaper, and it was just such a difference, because in this big home of hers, she shared her bedroom with her husband. Everybody had their own space but her. And it really made a difference for her. And instead of, doing that online shopping, she would just shut the door in her closet and go and use her, and she had a scented candle and a beautiful chandelier installed, and it was just magical. And so I often say to people, it's not about the stuff, right? There's always a why behind it. And this, is as well. If you can identify your values and then live your values. So if what you value is to be a loving spouse, and if what you value is healthy living, but you're not eating off the kitchen table because it's covered with papers and you're getting takeout because the kitchen's a mess, then you're not really living your values. And when you're like, no, I am a loving spouse would make sure that the dining room table was clear so that I can have a dinner with my spouse there every night, that the kitchen is in a state where I can prepare a healthy meal. So it's kind of circling back to the values, really, I think often helps people wanting to be a loving parent. You want to set a good role model, right? But you can't tell your kids, clean up your room if your room's a mess. So start by an example. So many times, I just got an email the other day from a student of mine in South Africa who took my paper cleanse course. And she was amazing. Her results were amazing. I just got an email from her the other day. She said, my husband just got rid of all of his camping gear. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. She's like, no, you don't understand. This is his identity. He climbed Mount Everest, but he's also in his 90s now. And he realizes that he better let go of that stuff and let it go to somebody else. And she said, I could never imagine in my lifetime that he would do that. But she got rid of her stuff. She was the example. And he looked around and saw how much better their life was. And he started thinking about himself. It's just amazing when, people finally get their paper cleared and then they're able to have people over. I just had a student start her own book club because that was part of her values, learning and socializing. But she wasn't doing it because she was embarrassed to have people over. And now she can. And that's really improved her life. I just love it.
So when we declutter and we organize and we let go of things, we're really shifting the energy. And I'm curious because I include some decluttering work in my money program, and I see money wins on the other side of this. Is that something you come across too?
Oh my gosh. We actually have a phrase. We call it the riches and the niches. And it's just like, how much will you find? So I have a membership and we do a thing called Sortathon about once a month. And people will dive in and do a project. So a student of mine, she was doing her greeting cards and she wanted to reduce all of these greeting cards. And as she was going through them, not only did she find greeting cards that she would never use, that she wanted to donate, but greeting cards that she had filled in that she had never mailed. She found 2 $100 bills, a $50 bill, and I think 2 gift cards for $100. So in doing that exercise, she gained $450. And she said to herself, she's like, I wondered why they never had thanked me for those gifts. She's like, I never mailed the gifts.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
So it's the riches and the niches. People find money. People find savings bonds. I just had a student find $1,200 in savings bonds. She had no idea that her deceased husband had purchased, mixed in with old magazines. So I always say, go through that stuff carefully. It takes some time, but almost always you will find riches and niches. Oh, finding the missing passport, right? it's a lot easier to find that missing passport than to apply for a new one and wait for it and all of that.
So I actually had an experience recently in exactly what you're talking about. I was receiving an email from a bank into my inbox. I thought, why am I getting this? I haven't banked with them for years. I am not subscribed, and there was no way of unsubscribing. It was driving me crazy. So I ignored it, like we ignore clutter. I ignored it, and they would come in every month, a fraud alert or, just their bank's general advice. And one day I thought, I'm going to deal with this digital clutter. And I called them up and I said, will you just take me off your mailing list? I had an account with you a decade ago. And they looked into it and they said, oh, you have an ISA. You have nearly £4,000 sitting there. I'm no longer resident in that country. And this literally, I'm in the process now of trying to reclaim that. But that's exactly what happened. Through tidying up my inbox, I found this old account that I thought was closed and completed with a not insignificant amount of money.
That's fantastic, Polly. I love it. A wonderful example of riches in the niches, right? So it's like if you do that exercise, you can satisfy yourself that you found the money, that there was nothing in that pile. Also, a tip is, especially for older people, always hiding money in books, always hiding money in the toes of shoes, in the pockets and purses and coats. So whenever I'm going through and helping people donate, perhaps an older relative has passed away, I always say, take your time, because these are people like my mother, who was born in World War II, grew up during the Depression. She was a young mother during World War II. She grew up in World War I. Those people were very frugal with their money and didn't necessarily trust the banks. So there's often a lot of cash, gold coins. I can't even tell you. And gold is up right now. An ounce of gold is worth like $2,000 or more. I had a client. She just thought they were like birthday toys, that they were in a drawer, not a jewelry drawer, not a banking drawer, just a drawer like with underwear for mothers. Underwear drawers. People hide so much in their underwear drawers. Anyway, those are a few tips for your listeners if they're helping older people clear out, because I had a client, wonderful woman, June, and she was in her 80s when I worked with her. And she said to me, let's do the coat closet. And she had every single purse and coat had $20 bills stashed in it. And this was from from the 50s and 60s. This was all vintage clothing. I passed it on to a costumer. It was amazing. And because she wanted her mad money. In case her husband made her angry when they went to the country club or out dancing, she wanted $20 so she could get a taxi cab home. She literally paid me in cash for that session. And she was like, told me to keep it all. She's like, finders keepers. If you hadn't have looked in those pockets, I'm like, I can't do that. I'll take my fee. We'll donate the rest. So that's also a great example of the riches in the niches.
I love it. I love it. All of this hidden money. It's amazing.
Yes.
I'm curious, do women acquire more clutter than men?
Most of my clients are women because I think women are traditionally the carers of the home and they feel more responsible for it. But I do not think that women collect more clutter than men. I think that it's different kinds of clutter. So men will tend to have a lot more sporting goods, a lot more electronics, cords and cables, and every computer they ever owned in their life is in an electronics graveyard in their basement. And women tend to be a little bit more sentimental. And this is just a generalization. So there'll be more of the family quilt or the children's, the baby clothing and stuff like that. But no, I think that it's pretty evenly divided. But as a tip for your listeners, again, in the collectibles world right now, if your mother or grandmother or great-grandmother collected it, linens, china, crystal, figurines, dolls, there's generally very little resale value. If your father, grandfather, great-grandfather collected it, think advertisements, smoking paraphernalia, sporting memorabilia, those types of things, like male kind of concept collectibles, there's a market for it. Watches.
Yeah, times have changed, trends have changed, and things that
Yeah.
used to be valuable, we no longer fit with our lifestyle, or they're no longer as valuable to us.
Right. I mean, CDs, DVDs, VCR tapes, right? Albums. I mean, I guess they're coming back in a way, but just as a kind of a showy thing, not as an actual way to listen to music. All of those things. My daughter doesn't own a turntable or a printer. She's 25. She doesn't need everything she has is digital. She's a digital native, whereas I am a digital dinosaur, right? So I still write everything on paper. That's the way I absorb information. And that's why I serve my people who are like me, proud paper people who don't want to scan things. I mean, if I scan it, it's as if it's disappeared into the ether. I'm tactile in that way, but I am 6 years old. So that's my generation. I can't say that. A lot of 60-year-olds are very, very digitally savvy. And to those of you, hats off to you. I need to learn more about that, I recognize that there's the irony that my last career I've now transitioned into is as an online educator. I can't believe that I'm teaching people concepts through this online world. And whenever I make a mistake digitally, I just ask for forgiveness because it's not my strong suit, but it's great because I'm learning something new every day. It's keeping my brain really plastic, right? Learning all of these new skills. AI, oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's an amazing world. So I'm excited for the next 40 years to see what it brings. And I love that now, it's just getting a little bit too old to put on my knee pads and go into people's homes and sort out their stuff. But I can do it virtually now and cheer people on around the world. And it's so much fun.
Right, and you get to have a much bigger impact. Once upon a time, our impact was limited to our neighborhood, our locality, and now you can impact people all over the world. And we can also, on the other side, start to make changes to ourselves, to our homes, to our environment without leaving the house, because we have access to all this incredible resources and trainings and support online.
It's true. It's amazing. It's amazing what people are so generous with their knowledge. And I try to be as well, because I recognize that not everybody can pay for it. So, I send out tips every week and people email me back and they're like, oh, that was super helpful.
So before we dive into how people can get started with decluttering with you, there's a question I always ask the guests on my show. What is true abundance for you at this point in your life?
That is the best question. So for me, and of course, it's not about the things. It's really about the relationship. So I'll just tell you a little story. So I turned 60 last November, and I have one daughter, and she took it upon herself to contact 60 people in my life and ask them to do a little video for me. And in the end, I think she had 71 people do a 1-minute video, and she gave it to me as a gift. Okay, sorry. I'm getting worked up and I thought to myself, how blessed is my life that I have 71 people, and some of them older than me, who would take the time and energy, like she coached them through how to do a video on Zoom. I mean, the effort that she put into it is mind-boggling, and that love is overpowering. But all of these people from my life, and she did it chronologically. So like the first person was my sister, then my cousins, and then, my best friends, up until like new friends that I've made, neighbors. It was amazing. And I thought, that's my abundance. These people that took that time and energy and effort to make my birthday special, but that I've had throughout my life, and even my new friends. And then I think, I'm only 60. My mom lived to nearly 99. I plan on living another 40 years. Who else can I meet and befriend in my life? I've been very lucky. I've had a strong marriage of over 30 years, and I assume that we will be together for the rest of my life. but these other friendships. So that's what my abundance is, Polly, my people.
What a beautiful story and what a gift from your daughter.
It was amazing.
Thank
I
you.
said, what are you going to do for my 70th? You're going to have to like rent an island and hologram people in. I mean, you're not going to be able to beat that. It was amazing.
Right, exactly. She's peaked. She didn't think about the future.
Yeah, exactly.
What a wonderful gift. So I think that decluttering is something that everybody can benefit from. Whether you've already done quite a bit and you consider yourself quite organized, I find that like I'm continually generating things to declutter, or maybe you're at the beginning that it's something you've been knowing for years that you need to do and you just are struggling to find time for it, you're struggling to prioritize it, you don't know where to start. How can people start with you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So a couple of different ways. I think one of the funnest ways is I have a membership called the Clarity Connection. And it's still a really small, intimate group. And we do co-working, we do these sortathons. We just did a challenge, and it was called the March Sanity Challenge based on March Madness, which is the basketball thing here in America. And the idea was you would do 7 rounds, and the first round, get rid of 1 thing, 2, 4, 8, 16, 16. And so over months to get rid of 127 things. And I just added it up yesterday. I had 21 people participate, and collectively they got rid of so much digital stuff, like 20,000 emails, digital files, photographs. But they also got rid of over 9,000 physical items.
Wow.
And it's because they were encouraging, posting pictures and jumping on a Q&A and doing a co-working. And you'd see somebody and they're in their closet and they're like, this is going, and, donating it and, talking about where you can recycle things to keep it out of the landfill, sharing those resources. So that has been super powerful. So this month we're doing a Clean Your Closet Challenge because it's a great time to switch over from winter to spring. And I'm like, maybe they already got rid of everything. There may not be anything left.
Good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have. So I think that that's one of the best ways that people can work with me. Plus, they can just get my Tip Tuesday. Every Tuesday, I do some type of organizing, lifestyle idea type of tip. And it's usually the simplest ones that people just absolutely resonate with.
And I think so often when we're an expert at something, we think things are simple or obvious, but they really aren't. People lead busy lives. They have a lot of priorities. And for most people, it's not getting organized and decluttering. You need to make that commitment and get support to actually make it happen. So you've got a special gift as well.
Oh, I call it the Chuck It list. So it's 60 items to chuck today. And it's just a great little checklist because it's the things you forget about. Like, just go into your spice drawer and get rid of those expired spices, right? And it takes really, you could have a child do this and you'll be so much happier. So my 60 items to chuck today, I'd be delighted if anybody wants to sign up for that.
Great. We'll make sure there's a link in the show notes to you and this gift and all of your good stuff and your social media as well.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for being on the show. I think you've shared so much wisdom. You've shared so many great tips. Like, I need to re-listen to it with a pen and paper to note down all of the tips that you've given. Thank you for opening up this world. It's the first time on the show we've talked about this topic, and yet it's such an important one. I just think it can be life-changing on so many levels. So thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom. And if there was one piece of advice you could leave people with, what would it be?
Think twice before you buy something. I mean, because it's the excess that really does us in. So being a very purposeful purchaser, I think it helps the environment. Like, do you have something that could suffice? I think the best example, Anne Lamott, I think, wrote a piece about her year of not shopping. And she was asked to be on stage with Tom Hanks. And normally that would trigger, let me go buy a new dress. But she didn't, because it was her year of no shopping. And she went to her closet and she found a beautiful dress and she put a pretty brooch on it. And people weren't there to see what she was wearing. They were there to see what she had to say, right? So thinking about, it's kind of the make, do, and mend concept, right? But do you already have something that could serve that purpose? And sometimes you don't, right? If you're taking up flying on the trapeze, then you're probably going to have to purchase hand grips. But chances are there's somebody like me who did that a decade ago who are really happy to give you their hand grips. And so, are there other places? Could you borrow it? I love that we have a wonderful community. And, there's one cake plate that goes to every house in my neighborhood for birthday. And I don't even actually know who the owner of that cake plate is anymore. But we just borrow it because you only need a cake plate for like birthday once or twice a year, right? I don't need to own a cake plate. So that would be my best advice. Think before you purchase. Be a purposeful purchaser.
I love it. I love it. So thank you for being on the show. I can't wait to dive into your world more deeply. And I know that people are going to get so much value from this. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Polly. It was such a delight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Feminine Millionaire Show. How fired up are you feeling to declutter and let go? I know I am. So if you'd like to go deeper with me, you can sign up for the Money Magnet Toolkit. This is completely free and it has 2 really powerful energy clearing meditations to help unlock the potential for more abundance within you and to help you manifest more money. The link is in the show notes. Pair that with decluttering and the gates of abundance are going to open. Have a wildly abundant week and I'll see you back here again next week. Bye for now.